Since the early 1600s, Americans have celebrated Thanksgiving, giving thanks to God for the blessings we enjoy in this country. But back in 1775, it wasn't as easy as going down to the supermarket to get a turkey. In The Rifleman, my new book, here's how some people did it. We were barely south of town when Casey suddenly alerted, hunched down, and pointed into the wind toward the underbrush. I dismounted, cocked my rifle, checked the pan to ensure I hadn't lost any powder, and walked slowly up behind her. Though I could neither see nor hear anything, she remained frozen in place as I crept forward, save the slight quiver in her hindquarters and the anxious furrow in her brow. The dog might have been carved out of wood. After peering into the foliage without glimpsing anything, I shrugged and said quietly, "Get him up." As my little brown dog charged into the brush, I hoped she wasn't about to flush a polecat or worse, a bear. My concern was instantly dispelled by several sharp puts as a large tom turkey ran out onto the trail with Casey in close pursuit. The bird took flight in a rush of wings, heading straight away down the path, high enough to give me a clear shot. The fowl dropped like a stone into the underbrush, followed by a retriever on a mission. You can know the rest of that story by getting your copy of The Rifleman. Order it now and you'll have it in time for Christmas. Hey, I'm Oliver North, the author of The Rifleman. This is riflemanbooks.com from premiercollectibles.com. And by the way, just so you all know this, they've done every one of my now 17 books. Some of them reprints going all the way back to the very first one more years ago than I even want to think about. With me here today is Dave Valinsky, who is my chief of staff. He basically keeps me on track, gets me to where I'm supposed to be, like this interview. So stick with us. This is going to be a fun time. It's all about this book and the people I've gotten to know. Dave, tell everybody how you and I got to know each other.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in this late night at 10 o'clock for this wonderful book signing that we're conducting with Colonel North. But Colonel North and I go back about 21 years ago. 21 years we met, and I've been with him for quite a while. We had a little break of time there, and I'm back again. What a great American, great author. And I'm going to surprise Colonel North and show everybody a picture from with us from 21 years ago.
So is it 21 years?
21 years ago. That was taken at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. on a very cold February night.
Clearly cold. Clearly cold. You know, a little more, Dave's a little bit too humble. Dave was a federal agent with the Naval Intelligence Service. The Naval Intelligence Service was providing security for my family from the terror threats in February of 2017, 2000. How about 1987? 1987.
Correct.
And 37 total federal agents protecting my family from a terror threat. And Dave became eventually the head of this whole detail to look after our family. He's also a very brave guy. He's been a law officer before that. He's been the kind of person you could count on every time. He was with me with my 3 patents, working on making armor to save the lives of law officers and folks in the U.S. military. So we've known each other a long, long time, and I'm glad to have you back.
I'm gled to be back,
and have my back. Okay, covering my 6. Thank you.
You're so
brother.
kind.
So what we're going to do is you just heard the computer ping. That's somebody emailing us already. You can access this by going to riflemanbook.com. Right?
That's correct.
Riflemanbook.com.
Yep. That's correct.
Send us an email, and we'll answer questions. Meanwhile, we're going to start signing these books, and Dave's going to be talking in my ear as I'm signing because I can't, chew gum and walk at the same time. I was a Marine, and so what I want to do is I want to start signing these books because I've got to get them all sold by the time we finish. Shortly after we finish, and it is late at night, and we want to make sure you have an opportunity to get in touch with us while we do it. So I'm going to start from this section. This book is about unsung heroes, and it's all about the beginning of the American Revolution and the very first offensive of the brand new Continental Army. And it's got things in it that are relevant to today. It's got betrayal. It's got efforts to remove the commander-in-chief. Sound familiar? It's got efforts at treason and traitors. It's got the idea of forming a new country out of and making a form of government no one has ever seen before. That's the kind of thing that this book tells the story of. And the unsung hero at the lead of this book is a fellow by the name of Daniel Morgan. Daniel Morgan, if you were alive today, would be a neighbor of ours out in the Shenandoah River Valley. And it's there that Daniel Morgan recruited a Continental Rifle Company because George Washington, the brand new head of the Continental Army, wanted to have riflemen able to kill British redcoats at something more than 60 yards, which was at the time the maximum effective range of a Continental Army or the British Army musket. And riflemen can kill a British soldier at 250 yards or more. So that's what the story is all about in the beginning of the Revolution. I'm going to take this down because I don't want to give away the end of the story. But it's all about that first offensive that the American Continental Army launches at the direction of Congress, and George Washington, the commander-in-chief, agrees, and they go all the way to invade a neighboring country called Canada, and how difficult that was. And, well, again, I don't want to give away the end. So I'm just going to sign some, and you want to just pose some questions? I know we've had some things.
I'm going to start off with a couple of questions of my own, Colonel.
Yeah.
You've written a number of novels, including a lot of historical books.
Yeah.
Why the Revolutionary War?
Well, it's kind of the beginning of the Newman family. The Newman family are the protagonists in all of my novels. And they are heroes, the kinds of people I've loved to keep company with all my life. My daddy was a hero, so the very first person I ever knew as a hero was my dad. And all the way through present times, as you know, I've been overseas a whole bunch covering America's heroes in this long war that we've been fighting. A lot of people don't know this. The American Revolution was the longest war America fought until the Vietnam War, where my brothers and I went off to serve. But that's why I went back to the very beginning, because it's the beginning of the Newman family as heroes.
And what were some of the challenges?
Well,
I mean, writing this book,
yeah.
when you've never done anything in this time period prior.
So, you know, a lot of my books, almost half, are nonfiction.
Right.
And they're based on the people with whom I kept company all those many years. And what makes it challenging to do a novel, an historical novel, where you're not just making up the whole story. The easiest novel I did was a future set novel, and it's set in the year 2032, called Heroes Proved. Well, you don't have to have any facts or quotes right. When you're doing something like this and you got George Washington sending orders to Daniel Morgan, you better be right about it. So the big challenge in this book was making sure that what I was putting down was historically accurate with, if you will, the background and the kinds of conversations people would really have. So all the real characters are in this book. In fact, the activities that they engage in, both the enemy and our friends and our allies. And we did have some allies, which were very important to the outcome of this war. All those are historically accurate. So getting that, I actually put footnotes. Probably the only novel you've ever seen with a footnote. And there's a bunch of them.
Well, we are getting some dings on the
Emails?
the monitor here, emails, or actually text messages, whatever.
Yeah.
I'd like you to take a couple of these questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Fire away.
I have a lot more of my own, but this is for the people out there. Ronald from Mulberry, Florida. He is asking, it says, how have you been doing and why didn't you enter politics?
I did at one point, probably before you were born. In 1994, I ran for the United States Senate here in Virginia. Was talked into it by again, this is Virginia, talked into it by a former United States Senator who was an independent, Harry Byrd, the only one, by the way, who served multiple terms as an independent, never a member of either party. Very much like Daniel Morgan. If you look at what he talked me into, it was taking on an incumbent, which is very often a thankless task. We've just had an election here in America. 96% of incumbents who ran again got reelected. I took on the incumbent, a Democrat, came very, very close in a multiple race. There were 3 candidates at the final count. And if there had been only 2, I'd have probably carried the day. But politics I've done. I now go out and encourage good politics. I will be very straightforward. I'm a friend of this president. And what he's going through right now is very typical of what transpired all the way back to the founding of this nation. The kinds of betrayal he's experienced, the treason that's gone on, the efforts to basically change our way of government. All of those take place in this book, and they're all about people who really did the kinds of things, good and bad, that made an outcome. And of course, ultimately one of the greatest traitors in the history of the world, a fellow by the name of Benedict Arnold, is a principal character in this book. Am I keeping up with you?
Yeah, you are. Doing a good job here.
Are you kicking me because I'm running
No, you
around?
gotta get a few more of these books right here.
All right, I got
Clear
you.
it out of the way, and then
Yeah.
we'll get you rolling. So the next question, this is interesting, from Sean in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Since you wrote about our founders of this great country that we live in, Sean is asking what traits that were prevalent in our founders should we expect in our leaders today?
That's a great question. I very often when I go out and speak to military guys, I'm asked to talk about leadership. And so leadership, and there's a number of qualities that are absolutely essential to it. One of which is situational awareness, what's going on around you and having a plan to deal with it.
Right.
Ultimately, the most important quality of a leader, and the most important quality of the leaders I've gotten to know in combat and in business and in politics, is integrity. I've been asked a lot by similar question. What's more important? Loyalty, the motto of the United States Marine Corps, the slogan is Semper Fidelis, always faithful. That's the ultimate loyalty. So what's more important? Integrity, which I believe, or loyalty? And my answer to that is, without integrity, you have nothing. Because if you don't have integrity, it doesn't matter what you're being loyal to. Very often, those who don't have integrity are loyal only to themselves. And so the greatest leaders I've gotten to know in combat and life as husbands and fathers and sons and daughters are the qualities of selfless leadership. In other words, those that you lead have to believe in their hearts, and you have to believe it too if you're the leader, that they are more important than you are, or that I am. And if they believe that you're selfless, not selfish, they will follow you into hell itself. I've been there.
A good answer.
These guys are too.
I know it.
Yeah.
This just came in from riflemanbook.com from Bert in Oceanside, California. Since you wrote about the Second Amendment in your new novel, will the NRA survive?
Lord, I hope so. In fact, one of the illustrations in this book was provided by the NRA, and I served as the 66th president of the NRA. The NRA is in trouble. There's no doubt about it. That word integrity is a very important part of being in an organization that goes out and asks for members to contribute money for their success. The fact is, the most recent election here in Virginia is proof that the NRA is in serious trouble, because the last place in the world you wanted to lose the control of the government totally is the place where your headquarters is located. And so my hope and my prayer is that the NRA, which is essential to the Second Amendment, and that the Second Amendment, which is crucial to the other 9 in our Bill of Rights, prevails. And there is a movement in America today to disarm the American people. I call it the Disarmament Movement. And what they want to do is repeal the Second Amendment. What they want to do is chop away enough at it that over time it becomes meaningless, and then repeal it. People say that can't happen. If you look at what transpired in New Zealand last year, the end result of that was the elimination of the right to keep and bear arms in New Zealand. The American people deserve to have a Second Amendment that is fully enforced, and that we deserve to elect people who want to preserve it. Bottom line, that's not happening today, and my hope is that the NRA can manage to find their way through the morass that they're in right now.
Sue from Central City, Kentucky, where I once lived in Kentucky. She just wants to make a comment. Just want you to know that I admire you immensely. Thank you for your service and your sacrifices.
Well, Sue, I appreciate that. I'm especially grateful to have someone who understands what I've been talking about here and what I've written about in this book. My hope is that the purpose of heroes is recognized not just by you but by others, and that is that what we really want to have are people who inspire others to be better than they otherwise would be. I mean, after all, that's the reason why, going all the way back to the Bible, that we recognize heroes for what they are. A hero is a person who puts themselves at risk for the benefit of others. In other words, selflessly. The ultimate hero for those of us who are Christians is Jesus Christ. I mean, he's the one who literally died for all of the rest of us, and thank God rose from the dead so I don't have to go to hell. And I look at those kinds of activities that I see on the battlefield and documented in this long war, that I lived through in the war that my brother Jack and I fought in called Vietnam, that I see in those kinds of people like Daniel Morgan and the heroes of this book. And ultimately it goes back to that belief, I've got to show others how to behave, how I expect them to behave. If you can't demonstrate that to them as a role model, it causes terrible frictions. It causes enormous unfulfilled expectations. And if you think about it, unfulfilled expectations are the greatest cause of anger on the planet. We wonder, how the heck did we get to a situation like we've seen in our nation's capital over the last 2 years? Well, because expectations were created. There were others who did not want those expectations to be fulfilled. And the ultimate cause of anger and frustration among parents and their children, teachers and students, husbands and wives, is unfulfilled expectations. And my goal is to make sure that I don't leave my kids, my grandkids, now 18 of them, with unfulfilled expectations because I didn't behave the way they expected me to. If I want them to behave with morality, if you will, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent, the Boy Scout standard. If you want people to do that, you have to live that way as an example. Thank you.
Here's another question from riflemanbook.com. Brian from Ruckersville, Virginia. As a U.S. Marine and veteran, was there any part in the Rifleman you felt a direct connection with?
Oh, yeah. It's a great question, buddy. One of the things that happens in combat is things that don't go the way you want them to, the way you hope they do. And I've always tried to look at those kinds of events. And without bragging, my rifle platoon in Vietnam successfully completed 72 ambushes against the enemy, in which we didn't lose a single Marine. We took a couple of guys wounded, but didn't take any serious casualties. 72 times we went out in the middle of the night and killed bad people who were trying to kill us. I look at that event and I say, we did the right things. But I will also tell you that the 28th of July, 1969 is the worst day of my life because we didn't do everything right. And as a consequence, a lot of good Marines got killed and wounded. And I look back at that and say, what could I have done differently in setting up that night bivouac, because that's what it really was, that would have changed the outcome? This book is full of those kinds of events. And in the aftermath of it, I figured out what I'd done wrong. I put my listening posts in the wrong place, and the enemy attacked right into our position. And as I say, killed and hurt. In fact, more Marines in that one night than I lost in all the time I spent in that country and 2 long trips to Vietnam. So I look back on those things that are in this book. I know that my description of what takes place is what I felt during and after that event. And again, I don't want to give away the end of this story, but it's all about that kind of an event. And it's toward the end of the book. And it's how Morgan felt. Morgan, thank God, survived it. But a lot of really good soldiers didn't.
All right. Carol from Flagler Beach, Florida would like to know, is this the first book in a new series? And then, quote, perhaps, unquote.
Well, let me just tell you something. This ends before the end of the war, okay? And so I'm already working on the sequel. But this is if you will, the prequel. This book is the prequel to the entire series about Peter Newman and his family, the Newman family. So this is the first, and it begins in 1775. Actually, it begins before that. It begins during what we call the French and Indian War here in this country. And overseas it was called the 7 Years' War. And it pitted Great Britain and their allies against the French and their allies, both here and overseas. And it was horrendous. had that war turned out differently, the language spoken in what is today Canada would be French. And at the end of the day, and some of you all remember this, it was Wolfe and Montcalm in the French and Indian War that ended it badly for France. And that part of all of that is in this book, because I want people to understand this is history. You know, Nathaniel Newman, who's the fictional protagonist, is surrounded by the kinds of people who brought about those outcomes. And of course, Daniel Morgan is an enormous part of all that. When you read about the things that took place with the secret committees and how all of that began thanks to a guy who's now recognized as a brewer, I'm talking about Mr. Adams, there was a lot more to this man and a lot more to his family. Of course, his cousin John becomes the second president of the United States. And when you remember what happens in the aftermath of all this stuff, if we didn't have people of enormous integrity who were out there battling against those who didn't have integrity, why, the outcome could well have been different. This form of government we have, which is now under attack, the form of government we have that has a Bill of Rights in it, and the decisions made, I'm going to give you one that's very, very practical from then to today. And you see this today during the enlistment process. The young person joining the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, raises their right hand and takes an oath to support and defend a constitution, not a political party, not some potentate, not a person, but a constitution. Ours is the only country on the planet where every single person who's serving in law enforcement, every person serving in the military, every person serving in elected office takes an oath to support and defend a constitution. Ours is the only constitution in the world that begins with a recognition of where we get the blessings of liberty. That can't be given by some prince or some king. That's given by God Almighty, the blessings of liberty. When you think about, and this is in this book, because today's modern teachings about the history of what transpired in forming this country leaves all that stuff out. They describe those who started our country, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, who signed onto the Constitution as being, at best, deists, not recognizing Jesus Christ for who he is, or even outright atheists. It's just not true. The quotes you have in this book about what those people said in forming this country and declaring independence and fighting against the most powerful country on the planet Earth, with one ally, France, eventually. And it's after something, by the way, that Daniel Morgan does that brings that about. Those kinds of things really are important to who we are and who we remain as a country. If we fail to do that, we fail terribly. Ronald Reagan, the president that I was blessed to serve, used to say, the loss of freedom is only one generation away. This is an inspiration to preserve that freedom for my kids and my grandkids. Did I sign this one?
Yeah, I don't know. We got plenty more to do here, so keep rolling.
Get hot? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I'm thinking the same thing. Let's get hot here. So we just got another text come in from riflemanbook.com. Hap Smith, Wapapello, Missouri. Don't ask how to spell that. But anyway, his question is, sir, were any of these riflemen in the book, the Rifleman, Marines?
Well, actually, the Marine Corps doesn't get formed until November 10th, 1775. And by then, these folks in this unit, the riflemen lead the attack of a militia unit and new Continental soldiers into Canada. There were no U.S. Marines who were U.S. Marines on the way to Canada. There were those who came back from Canada after the terrible outcome that's true in this book, and who became Marines. It's not a joke that we just celebrated here a few weeks ago, the 244th anniversary of the United States Marine Corps. And it's true that the United States Marine Corps was formed in a tavern called Tun Tavern in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which was, again, our nation's capital at the time. And if you look at what happens to some of those Marines, they're legendary. And they're not in this book, but don't give up. There'll be more. Did I give away too much?
You gave away quite a bit, but that's quite all right. I want to read more after hearing that. Here's a real good question from Donnie Holloway in Mystic, Connecticut. Were any of the heroes from this time period your role models or inspiration growing up or during your career?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, you know, I was blessed to be surrounded by remarkable leaders and who set a great example for me as to how to do it. And many of them, I've actually got their names in here. And they're fictional characters, but they're just like the real people who did the real things. And there's a good number of them in this book, and they'll all recognize their names. In fact, I've used many names in my other nonfiction books, or excuse me, in my other fiction books, about using the names of the people that I've known who've done remarkable things. So, yeah, I've always been, and I've always tipped them off, and I've gotten permission to do that. Not surprisingly, those that I've known have been really good people. There's a couple of bad people I've gotten to know, and their names are in some of my books as well. And you know who you are.
Moving right along, Mike Vogel from Sarasota, Florida. I personally know Mike. He's a retired NCIS agent. His question is, which of the founding fathers would you most like to meet? Good question.
It is a good question. Let me think about that. Obviously, Morgan. I mean, Morgan lives. If Morgan were alive today, I could, go across the Shenandoah River and he'd be there. And those he recruited to go and walk 600 miles from Winchester, Virginia, all the way to Boston. At a point in time, by the way, where I-95 didn't exist. There were no bridges over all those waterways. There were ferry boats in some. And ferry services were a very large part of colonial America. When you look at what they endured on that march, it was nothing compared to the march that they made from Cambridge, Massachusetts. They got there in 21 days. I like to tell these stories to Boy Scouts when they come and visit, because we look down into the Shenandoah Valley from Washington's Lookout, which is now right off Route 7, near Bear's Den Hostel. There's a name for Bear's Den that's very relevant because there's a lot of bears on top of that mountain. And I'd like to point out to them, various places you can see down out to the west and the beginning of the Appalachians and the Valley of Virginia is the Shenandoah, and point out to things and then say, think about this. 21 days it takes Morgan and his riflemen to walk and ford rivers and climb mountains with all that they needed to fight with. And 21 days, every one of them made it. Not one guy dropped out. Those are the kinds of things that you look at. It's got to inspire you.
Right. Folks, if you'd like to get some questions in, please feel free to go ahead and go to our website, riflemanbook.com. We are taking questions live here, so go ahead and shoot a few in if you'd like. Right now, I've got one that did come in from rifleman.com. Edward from Plainfield, Indiana. What do you find most surprising about the Revolutionary War era combat?
Great question. In fact, the most surprising thing overall is how young everybody was. I mean, Jefferson was 33 when he's drafting in Philadelphia the Declaration of Independence. Nathaniel, the protagonist, is 17. And if you look at what they went through, it's extraordinary. And I know about the whole thing about the business of millennials and what people, but these are real people who at 15, 16, 17 years of age volunteered. Everybody's a volunteer. There's nobody drafted into the Continental Army, who want to fight to preserve or at least achieve freedom and preserve it after the war is over. Nobody expected this war was going to last as long as it did. As I said, it's the longest war we fought until the war in Vietnam. And when you look at what these young people did and the extraordinary success that they had after losing battle after battle, to still prevail over the greatest power on the planet Earth at the time is extraordinary. And so I found that to be one of the most remarkable things about, as I delved into the history. I've been a military historian now for 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I had to go back and actually look at the kinds of things that were done by people who were my neighbors if I was alive back in 1775. It is extraordinary. That's, by the way, why that cover is what it is. And the artwork and the maps that are in here, which are real. That's the hands of a real rifleman. In fact, I'll send some video off to to the folks who are putting all this thing together. Maybe you can see I'm firing a replica of one of those. I have a real one, made in 1803 by a family by the name of Barlow. The rifle that Nathaniel is carrying was made in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, by the family named Henry. And those of you who know firearms know that's a name that's been around for over almost 250 years and making great firearms.
I'm going to throw a question from myself, yours truly. A lot of the readers may be surprised to discover that the American Revolution was one of the most uncivil of civil wars. Why?
Yeah, I mean...
I find it hard to believe, but go ahead.
Well, the population was almost split 50-50. Now, it didn't start out that way. Nobody that I know, in all the research that I've done to make this particular part of the series accurate, almost no one stood up and said, we need to have independence from the crown forever. They were originally, if you go back to the beginning of all of the acts taken by the British government, were trying to keep the American people inside the box, part of the British Empire. And it's only after the war has already begun, and by the way, the war did not begin in 1776, it begins in 1775 at a place called Lexington and Concord. And after that, there was no doubt there was going to be a war. There was no doubt in anybody's mind, to include the Loyalists, which at the time comprised about half the American population. And so what you end up with are British units that are made up of both British regular soldiers, Hessian soldiers, and mercenaries of various stripes, and of course Loyalists, or Tories as they were called. So on our side, we ended up with people who said, nope, you know what, I've had enough of this stuff. And we're going to go on with the idea that Patrick Henry had advocated right from the beginning, that we want full and complete independence, and we're going to build a brand new system of government of, by, and for the people, totally different than any other place on the planet Earth. Did I do justice to your question?
Yeah, you did. Thank you. Now I know the answer. Bonnie from Fishkill, New York.
Yeah, it's in the book, by the way.
Do you add any of your own personal experiences to any of your stories?
Sure. I mean, I grew up. My dad was in the Army, so we grew up all over the place. Upstate New York is where my brothers and I all went to high school, and so upstate New York becomes very important to the outcome of the Revolution. A place called Fort Ticonderoga, the artillery that eventually drives the British out of Boston, the occupying siege of Boston. Fort Ticonderoga is in upstate New York. The path taken by the attack, it's a two-column attack. The Congress sends the Continental Army in two portions, one that Morgan was with and the other one with General Schuyler and General Montgomery, up the Ticonderoga, up that process of Lake George, Lake Champlain, straight at Montreal, and then the one that Daniel Morgan was the lead element for, up through the wilds of Maine toward Quebec. The idea was, and the map's in here that shows it, they were supposed to link up just outside Quebec. Mm-hmm. And of course, disaster befalls. And one of the big challenges is, I don't want to give away the answer, but one of the big challenges, how long are the enlistments going to last for those who volunteered to serve? And it's very, very dramatic, and it's true.
Great. It's another text just came in, or a question came in from Donald in Youngstown, Ohio. What do you consider so far your greatest accomplishment in life?
Oh, that's easy. That's easy. Being the husband of one, father of 4, and the grandfather of 18. And if at the end of my days, my guess is I'm probably closer to the end than I am to the beginning 76 years ago. Don't know how many more minutes, hours, days, weeks, months the good Lord's going to give me, but hopefully long enough to have some more fun with books like this. I've already told him this, and this is not a maudlin thought, because not one of us is going to survive this experience called life. It's where we go after this life that matters most to me. And so I want my kids and grandkids to put on that marker at Arlington Cemetery, which I've already kind of picked out where I want. It's nice, there's a tree nearby, and you don't hear the roar of the airplanes quite so much out of National Airport or Reagan Airport. On the back, instead of a list of medals and all that kind of stuff, I wanted to put the words, and it's Paul's letter to Timothy. It's the last letter, and more likely, that he wrote on this planet Earth. He's about to be executed by Nero. And he writes to Timothy, reminding Timothy of who he was, he, Paul, apostle of Christ. And he says, I want to remind you that I, Paul, I fought the good fight, I finished the race, and I kept the faith. And if my kids and grandkids will say that about me, I'll have succeeded, because they'll understand what that's all about. Not that I am the centerpiece of it, but those 3 steps in life are what I hope I guided them to.
Oh, that's great. Another question from riflemanbook.com. Jerry from Poughkeepsie, New York.
Yeah, right down the river.
What is the best thing you have learned from writing books like The Rifleman?
Well, how much fun they are. I mean, and by the way, this whole process of riflemanbook.com and the idea of Premier Collectibles did this. In every other of these 16 prior books, I've gotten on buses and ridden all over America, doing book signings at bookstores and Costco's and Walmart's, and that's fun, don't get me wrong, but it's exhausting. And if you don't have anything else to do in life, and Dave knows what this is like because he's been around me a good bit, it's exhausting. And quite frankly, it takes me from my family. And I've spent, Betsy and I just celebrated our 50th anniversary last year. So this is our 51st, which just went weeks ago. And the kids said to Betsy at our 50th, because they put on a nice party for us, he said, Mom, how did you put up with him for as long as this, a half century? And she said, well, he was gone for half of it, so we've only really been married for 25. I don't want to spend any more time away from her now than I have to. And so this idea of doing book signings this way, I just really want to commend Premier Collectibles for coming up with it, because it's the way of the future. And I'm grateful for Sean Hannity in promoting it. There's no doubt that in the business of the media, there are very few friends, because you're not only competing against your opponents and the other sides and the other networks and the other publishers, but you're also competing against your own colleagues to be number 1 in your network. Well, Sean Hannity is number 1 in the Fox News network, and Sean's friendship has been incredibly valuable. So thank you, by the way, Sean, for promoting this. And by the way, you do note that we waited until after he went off air tonight before coming on. Yeah, and thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah.
That's right.
He kicked me under the table. Yeah.
Don from Wilton, California.
Yeah, Don.
Will you take on any nonfiction work in the future and tell some of the stories of history?
Well, yeah. I mean, 3 of my books, and this is not shameless self-promotion, but 3 of my books are about current heroes. It's contemporary history. And somebody else is under the table right now. Do we have time to put her, let people see somebody as part of the book?
Come here.
And so, yes, my hope is that I got time to do both.
Come here, Casey.
More nonfiction as well as more fiction. Casey, up here. Come on. Come on up here. No, up here. No, you got to come over here. Come on, over here.
Over here.
So, come on, up here. Up. Come on. Oh. All right, you're going to come up here? Come on. All right. So, am I off camera now? Let me get back in position here. So, let me just, Casey is part of this book. And it's the real Casey. And in fact, we've gone up on, is it up on olivernorth.com?
It's up on Facebook, your Facebook page, and Twitter account.
Yeah. So she's in some of our promotional stuff for the book and for Thanksgiving, and the real name Casey. So she's one of those characters, kind of like, so, all the rest of my buddies are also going to notice. Dave's in the book as well. Yeah. So, yeah. I got completely off script. So where am I supposed to be?
That's quite all right. Sign some more books while you're here. Just some of the comments while you're signing.
Yeah.
John, let's see. John from Simi Valley, California. Thank you, sir. Let's see.
Get my chin back. All right.
Mary from Gurnee, Illinois. You're a true American hero. Please write more.
There you go.
Let's see if I can find a few more here that have come in. A lot of compliments.
Well, I saw one that came out the career. Mary asked about, are we going to do any more trips to historic places? Because last year we did Normandy. We're actually on our way to the Holy Land. We leave on the 27th. 27th of January. We'll be back early February. It's a 10-day trip. And that's the kind of history I just love, because it's also, just like this book, it's accurate, it's written down, but there are no fictional characters in it because it's all out of the Holy Bible. And so we're taking a group of about 100. We still have space?
I think there's still some space left,
Yeah.
Colonel.
So we're taking,
not many.
Yeah, we'll take no more than 100 because I want to get to know people. We've done this. I've made 30 some odd trips to the Holy Land, and walking through that, I describe it as kind of like, it's not kind of like, it is. It's taking the black and white words of the Bible and putting it out there in Technicolor. And I don't joke about the fact. I think it's important that every American, regardless of their denomination or their religious background or their spiritual sense, make a trip to the Holy Land, because that's where it all begins. And by the way, there are people in this book who understand that. And I'm not ashamed to put that into a book. Like, I know nowadays you're not supposed to talk about your faith and your spiritual sense of what's right and wrong, but I don't have a problem with that, in fiction or nonfiction, by the way. Yeah. Come on with us to the Holy Land.
Okay,
How do people find out about the Holy Land trip? FreedomAlliance.org?
Yeah, freedomalliance.org.
There you go.
Freedomalliance.org.
Yeah.
All right, this is the portion of the book signing where we're going to do 22 questions.
Uh-oh.
2 minutes. Do you
Yeah.
think you can do it in 2 minutes?
I don't know. Ask the questions.
In other words, this is rapid fire.
In other words, I can't go on my link.
No,
like
you
the-
can't. You got to just give me some rapid answers here. Who is your greatest inspiration?
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
You told us folks that.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's...
Who would you like to
I
trade?
don't, by the way, I've not read these questions, so...
That's right. These are just they're just off the cuff here, pretty much. Who would you like to trade places with if you could?
Daniel Morgan. I'd love to have been that. I'd also love to have been an astronaut, but yeah.
Who makes you laugh the most?
Oh, Betsy, by far.
That's
Yeah.
a good answer.
Yeah.
Who would you want to play? Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston, of course. Of course, he's not around anymore. But
No.
what is your guilty pleasure?
Beer. I love a cold beer. Particularly an IPA. Yeah, and I made myself a promise for the rest of my days. I'm going to try to be in a place where I can have 2 a night, and that's not where I've spent most of my life the last 10 years, because over there it's hard to find a beer.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
What's the one thing that you need to have in your refrigerator all times?
that would be the beer.
Perfect follow-up. What is your favorite ab workout?
Ab workout.
Yeah.
I actually, my favorite nowadays is when I get in the car, because I've had so much back surgery, and I get in the car, I will tighten my gut as I'm sitting there driving. It also helps keep me awake, because I don't have a beer before I drive, and I'm trying to get home safely to have one. But my favorite ab workout, because sit-ups actually can sometimes damage the kind of surgery out of my back.
Right.
And it's working. I mean, they're 6-packs anymore, but it's pretty.
It's still pretty
not
good,
bad
yeah.
for a geezer. Yeah.
I know the answer to this one. What is your dream car?
Shelby Cobra.
I knew it.
Shelby Cobra. There you go. That's how I got my girl, by the way. No, Betsy, I was kidding.
What is the last person? Who was the last person that you texted or called?
Probably you this morning.
Probably.
I guess. Yeah, it was dark 30 this morning. Yeah.
What makes you happy? Boy, that's a loaded question.
Well, it makes me happy. We just finished Christmas or Thanksgiving, and we're going to do the same thing around Christmas. Having the entire North herd together, these are connected by marriage or by DNA. The 18 grandkids, having them in the same place is just fantastic. And if somebody told me that there'd someday be 28 people with whom are related, I'd said impossible. But the good Lord blessed us, and these 18 grandkids. I just want the boys to know no more contact tackling when we're playing touch football. That's damn near finished. Thanksgiving afternoon. Yeah.
Let's see. What is your biggest pet peeve?
This sounds. I don't mean to take on my colleagues in the media, but the way the media handles news It doesn't do it right anymore. And that's a serious deficiency. And I'm not the only one that sees this. The rest of America does, which is why social media is now replacing newspapers and real broadcast news. It's awful. And that is a pet peeve.
How do you take your coffee?
Black. Cold, hot, doesn't matter as long as it's black.
What is the last album you bought?
Actually, the last I'm not sure that I actually bought it, but they may have given it to me. A great Christian band called For King and Country.
Oh, yeah.
They are terrific. They were just on with Dolly Parton on the American Country Music Awards. And this is a Christian band, but they're terrific. I went to their Christmas show when it was here in Virginia last year. If you haven't seen it already, it's magnificent.
What was the last movie you saw in theaters?
Knives Out. Betsy and I went Sunday night because it was pouring rain, perfect day. We went to a matinee, and I don't know if the critics want me to say this or not, but it's vulgarity. It's Father Brown with vulgarity. I mean, they didn't need the vulgar language, but it is absolutely hilarious, and it's a great whodunnit. Really was, and she liked it.
I got to go see it. You were talking about it earlier.
Fun flick.
What is the last book you read?
Well, we had Bible study this morning, so I guess that qualifies.
Let's see. Oh boy, what is your middle name?
Lawrence.
That's right.
With a U.
And are you a morning person or a night owl? I know that answer, but I'll let you tell the folks.
Pretty much both.
You never sleep.
No, I do. And everybody around me, and you know this too because you've been around me probably more this year than Betsy has. And if I get less than 4 hours sleep a night, I'm grumpy. If I get 4.5, 5 hours sleep, I'm fine. And that's how I finished the book, if you may remember.
Yeah, I remember. What cause is dear to your heart?
Well, look at. I don't think we do enough to recognize the courage of America's law enforcement, our cops, our deputy sheriffs, our federal law agents, and as you know, I'm very close to a lot of those guys, and our military. And the cause of looking after them and their families, and when they tragically don't survive an engagement when they're in the line of duty. Those kinds of things are a cause worth supporting. They really are.
And finally, next weekend is December 14th, Saturday.
Yeah.
There's a big game that's being played up in Philadelphia.
Annual
I know a lot of folks out there would like to know what side will you be sitting on and who is going to win the game?
Well, as you know, President Trump came to our booth 2 years ago, and as president-elect. And he spent the first half of the game on the Army side, and then he came over to the Navy side. And my Army brother, I just want to make this as a prediction. One, go out and get the book. Go online right now and order one in time. You'll get it for Christmas. But my Army brother, the streak ends at 3. Navy is back. And Navy is going to take this game by at least 14 points. That's a prediction. He and I bet every year. And just know, Jack, the streak is over for you guys because Navy's got a great team this year. And we'll be there. We'll be there.
Well, Colonel, that about wraps it up. If you can go ahead and sign us off,
Yeah.
let the folks know where to go to purchase the book.
Here it is. Okay. So he wrote it down for me, so I got it, right? Okay. Signed copies are available at riflemanbook.com. And by the way, Rifleman is spelled Rifleman, book, all one word, .com. So riflemanbook.com, that's the place to get it. Think of it this way. On the back is the guy who used to be a federal agent, standing next to me, freezing our buns off. The Jefferson Memorial?
Jefferson Memorial.
Yeah,
Right.
Jefferson Memorial, Washington,
Franklin
D.C.
Jefferson.
Back a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Pretty fit looking
Yeah, we
guys.
both had dark hair then, too.
Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it and had as much fun with this as I did. And I'm grateful for those of you who get out there and get this book in time for Christmas and give it as a great inspirational book. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
The water behind me is the beautiful and legendary north-flowing Shenandoah River. It's a body of water of which songs are sung just west of the Blue Ridge Mountains here in Virginia. More than a half century ago, I fell in love and then married the wonderful woman who owns these banks on the Shenandoah River. Still love her and it and our 4 kids and 18 grandchildren. Now, some are saying our nation is in the midst of an intractable disarray. Impeachment is oft mentioned. Foreign adversaries threaten the safety of our citizens. Our very form of government seems to be at risk. The ultimate question is, how do we survive all this? Well, the answer is in the actions, not just the words of our nation's founders, many of whom are unsung heroes of the American Revolution. One of those heroes is a patriot named Daniel Morgan. If Daniel Morgan were alive today, he'd be my near neighbor in Virginia's beautiful Shenandoah Valley. On the 14th of June, 1775, the Congress appointed George Washington to be Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army and granted his request for 10 companies of expert riflemen, those who carry this. It took just 21 days for Captain Daniel Morgan and his Virginia Rifle Company to march 600 miles to Boston, becoming the first troops from outside New England to confront the British Army. Just weeks later, Captain Morgan's riflemen were selected to lead the first American offensive of the Revolution, the invasion of Canada. They wore hunting shirts, linsey-woolsey leggings, had tomahawks and scalping knives in their belts. Every rifleman was a volunteer. Every one of them could take a rifle like this, having been a tracker and a hunter, and kill a British redcoat at 250 yards or more, just like this. This is their story about unflinching courage, tenacity, faith, and love in the face of grave danger. It's a great read for anybody you love and want to inspire.